So we have our work cut out for us. And although we have made great strides, we are still falling short of the Millennium Development Goals, those goals adopted 10 years ago by the United Nations to help end poverty once and for all, goals for all the world to try to achieve. And the current economic and financial crisis has increased the number of girls dropping out of school because their families are feeling the strains of keeping them in school. We have found over the years that a range of interventions, from the elimination of school fees to providing school meals or incentives to families, simple things like a bag of flour, a canister of oil to a poor family, is enough to encourage them, to incent them to send their girls to school and to keep them in school. These practices can make such a difference, from keeping the girls from being married off while still children, and ease the burdens on families who are trying so hard to eke out their existence. The quality of education still must be addressed. The safety of girls in school, going to and from school, continue to be imperatives. And secondary education is still elusive to too many and needs to be a top priority for all of us. Every girl should be able to go to school, because we not only shortchange her if she doesn't, we shortchange our world of the potential that she represents. Second, the right to economic participation. Multiple studies have shown that women are the key drivers of economic growth. The Economist magazine quoted some data that underscores this by saying, forget China, forget India, forget the internet. It is women who drive GDP. Women invest up to 90% of their incomes in their families and their communities, and they are the best and most efficient investment in raising the standard of living around the world. Over the last 15 years since Beijing, microcredit, small amounts of credit, particularly to the poorest of the poor, have lifted up tens of millions of women and their families out of poverty. Today, upwards to 80 to 90% of micro borrowers are women because they are good investments and they pay their loans back on time. Microcredit, as important as it is, however, and as much as it needs to grow and be available, is not enough. Women need markets for their products. They need education and training. They need the ability to grow businesses from micro enterprises into small and medium-sized enterprises. SMEs are really where the growth potential lies. Trade and economic policies that affect them rarely consider their needs. And all of this needs to change if their potential for economic growth is to be unleashed. Women's interests must be included in our overall economic policy initiatives. Third, the right to participate in the political life of our societies. Women are still underrepresented in the parliaments and the legislatures of nearly every country on earth. Their voices need to be heard, not only because women have the right to participate in the processes and decisions that affect them, but also because the world needs to hear women's perspectives and experiences. I remember working over many years to help women in Kuwait who were struggling to get the right to vote and stand for office. They worked very hard, and I remember one very successful woman, a professor in her country, she said, "Why do I work so hard for this right?" She said, "I've got a fabulous family. I have a terrific job that challenges me. I have good friends. I have everything in life I would ever want. And she expressed this at a program in Washington and said that that morning she had had an experience. We had taken her to our Congress where she was met with women from both sides of the political spectrum who told her how they had come together to work on legislation that affects women's health or women's access to funding for sports and universities, women's access to credit and small business incentives. And she said, I listened to them, and I said to myself, imagine what we could do in our country if we got the right to vote and stand for office. And just last year, finally, after getting the right to vote and stand for office, 4 women were elected to the parliament. And I remember working with them as they were struggling as to how they were going to make their case, because they hadn't been able to succeed with their parliament on achieving the right to vote and stand for office, which seems so basic. And they were struggling with their theme, which had been women's rights, to be sure. And then as they thought about it, they said it wasn't just women's rights, it was about the future of their country. And they added, because this was about the future of Kuwait. And young people came together, women came together across the spectrum, and men joined their cause because they realized this was about the future. It is like envisioning 2020. What is the future we want to see? And there is something called Security Council Resolution 1325. And that is something we are still struggling to achieve 10 years after it was passed. And that is that women have a right, and the countries, their countries and our world needs them to exercise the right to participate in peacemaking, in peace negotiations, in post-conflict resolution. They need to be at the table, or the peace will never hold as it might. And these 10 years later, as we struggle in so many places around the world to get women to the tables where negotiations are going on and deliberations are taking place and conversations about them and their families are occurring, they need to be there to participate. And where they have been, from Northern Ireland to Rwanda, the outcome has been to the benefit of their countries and our world. Fourth, the right to be free from violence. This could not be a more critical issue and one that you will be grappling with throughout this day. Violence against women and girls is a global pandemic. Its scope and its scale make it simultaneously one of the largest and most entrenched human rights and development issues before us. It affects girls and women at every point in their lives. This violence cannot be explained away as cultural. It is criminal, and it needs to be dealt with because it is a crime. Women in Africa first put this on the agenda for the world in the Nairobi conference, which preceded Beijing. And in Beijing, once and for all, it was chiseled into international human rights law.